They released fear gas. The human took a deep breath and smiled. Part 1. Han Do-yun woke up in darkness. His head hurt badly and his mouth tasted like blood and metal. For a few seconds, he did not know where he was. He tried to move his hands, but they felt heavy and slow. His whole body felt wrong, like he had been sleeping for days. Slowly, his eyes began to see in the dim light. He was lying on a cold floor made of some strange black material. The walls around him were smooth and gray, and there was a soft blue light coming from somewhere above. This was not his ship. This was not anywhere he knew. Then the memories came back like a wave. The ambush, the explosions, the screaming of his crew as the enemy ships tore through the harangue like it was made of paper. He remembered giving orders, trying to save as many people as he could. He remembered the bright flash of light, and then nothing. Do-yun sat up slowly and looked around. He was in a cell. The room was small, maybe 3 meters by 3 meters. There was no bed, no chair, nothing but the cold floor and the smooth walls. One wall was different from the others. It was made of something clear, like glass but stronger. Through it, he could see a long hallway with more cells on the other side. He was a prisoner. Do-yun touched his uniform. It was torn in several places, and there was dried blood on his sleeve, but he did not think it was his blood. His rank badge was gone, and so was his communication device. They had taken everything useful. He stood up slowly, testing his legs. They worked, which was good. He walked to the glass wall and looked out. The hallway was empty and quiet. The light was the same dim blue as in his cell. Everything felt cold and sterile, like a hospital but without any warmth. A sound made him turn around. In the corner of his cell, hidden in the shadows, something moved. Do-yun stepped back and raised his fists, ready to fight. His heart beat faster. A small figure stepped into the light. It was not human. The creature stood about 1 meter tall. It had fur the color of rust, large ears that pointed up, and a face that looked something like a fox but with bigger eyes. Those eyes were looking at Do-yun with a mix of fear and curiosity. The creature held up its small hands, showing that it had no weapons. "Please," it said in a voice that was high and thin, "I am not your enemy. I am a prisoner like you." Do-yun lowered his fist slowly, but he did not relax. "What are you? Where am I?" The creature's ears moved. "My name is Ravi. I am Umi from the Umi Federation. You are on a Velthari prison ship. They call it the Pale Silence." "Velthari," Do-yun repeated. He had heard that name before in mission briefings. The Velthari Dominion was a powerful empire that had conquered many worlds. They were known for being cruel and efficient. "How long have I been here?" "You were brought in 6 hours ago," Ravi said. "They put you in my cell. I do not know why. Maybe they are running out of space. Maybe they want me to watch you." Do-yun looked at the small alien. Ravi seemed harmless, but he knew better than to trust appearances. "What happened to my crew, my ship?" Ravi's ears drooped. "I am sorry, I do not know. When they brought you, you were alone. The guard said something about a specimen. They seemed excited." Specimen, the word made Do-yun feel cold. "What do you mean, excited?" Ravi moved closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The Velthari have never seen a human before. Your species is new to this part of space. They want to study you. They want to know how to break you." "Break me?" Ravi nodded, his big eyes full of sadness. "That is what they do. The Velthari do not conquer with armies. They conquer with fear. They have a weapon, a gas that makes you feel terror beyond anything you can imagine. Every species they have used it on has broken. Every single one. I have seen it happen. I have been here for 3 cycles." Do-yun listened carefully. He had been trained to survive capture, trained to resist interrogation. But this sounded different. This sounded like something worse than pain. "What happens when someone breaks?" he asked. Ravi shivered. "They become empty. They tell the Velthari everything, every secret, every weakness of their people. And then the Velthari use that information to conquer their worlds. That is how the Dominion grows, not through war but through fear. Do-Yun walked back to the glass wall and looked out at the empty hallway. Somewhere on this ship, aliens were planning to use some kind of fear weapon on him. They wanted to break his mind and use him against his own people. He thought about Earth. He thought about his family, his friends, everyone he was supposed to protect. He thought about all the species that had already fallen to the Velthari. "How long do I have?" he asked. "They said morning," Ravi replied. "They will come for you in the morning for processing. That is what they call it, processing." Do-Yun nodded slowly. He had maybe 8 hours, maybe less. 8 hours to prepare for something he did not fully understand. He sat down against the wall facing the glass. His body was tired, but his mind was working fast. He needed to think. He needed to plan. Ravi sat down a few feet away, watching him. "Are you not afraid?" Do-Yun looked at the small alien. "I am afraid," he admitted. "But fear is not new to me. I am a soldier. I have been afraid many times." "This is different," Ravi said quietly. "The gas makes you face your deepest terror, the thing you are most afraid of in all the universe. No one can resist it. No one." Do-Yun was quiet for a long moment. He thought about the worst fears he had, the darkest corners of his mind. Everyone had them. Everyone had something that scared them more than anything else. "Tell me more about the Velthari," he said finally. "Tell me everything you know." Ravi's ears perked up slightly. Most prisoners spent their last hours crying or begging. This human wanted information. That was strange. That was different. So Ravi talked. He told Do-Yun about the Velthari, how they looked like tall insects with hard shells and many eyes. He told him about their society, their cold logic, their complete lack of emotion. He told him about the fear gas, how it was made from chemicals that attacked the brain directly. Do-Yun listened to everything, asking questions, taking mental notes. He learned that the Velthari saw themselves as superior to all other species. They believed that fear was the ultimate truth, that every being in the universe would surrender when faced with enough terror. That was their weakness, Do-Yun realized. They believed too much in their own weapon. They had never faced something that did not work the way they expected. Hours passed. The blue light never changed, so it was impossible to tell time properly. Do-Yun tried to rest, but his mind would not stop working. He kept thinking about what was coming, trying to prepare himself. When the sound of footsteps finally came, both prisoners looked toward the glass wall. 3 Velthari guards stood in the hallway. They were tall, almost 2 meters, with dark green shells that looked like armor. Their heads had too many eyes, all of them black and shiny. They moved with a strange clicking sound, their many legs tapping on the floor. One of them pressed something on the wall, and the glass slid open. "Human," the guard said. Its voice was cold and flat, like it was reading from a script. "You will come with us. It is time for processing." Do-Yun stood up slowly. He looked at Ravi one last time. "Thank you for the information," he said. Ravi stared at him with wide eyes. "Good luck, human, I hope you surprise them." Do-Yun walked toward the guards. He kept his back straight and his head high. He was afraid, yes, but he had been afraid before and he had survived. The guards surrounded him and began walking down the long hallway. Their clicking footsteps echoed in the silence. Whatever was waiting for him, Do-Yun would face it. He was human. His people had faced fear since the beginning of time. And they were still standing. They released fear gas. The human took a deep breath and smiled. Part 2. The guards led Do-Yun through a maze of hallways. Every corridor looked the same, gray walls and blue lights, cold and empty. They passed no windows, so he could not see outside. He had no idea how big this ship was or where in space they were. Finally, they reached a large door. It was different from the others, made of something that looked like polished metal. Strange symbols were carved into its surface. One of the guards pressed its clawed hand against a panel, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. The room beyond was large and circular. The walls curved up to meet a domed ceiling, and everything was made of the same cold gray material. In the center of the room stood a glass chamber, about 3 meters wide and 3 meters tall. It looked like a cage, but cleaner, more scientific. Around the glass chamber there were machines and screens, all showing numbers and symbols that Do-yun could not read. Several Velthari were working at these machines, their many eyes fixed on the screens. They wore different clothing than the guards, lighter and with strange markings. Scientists, Do-yun guessed. But the most important figure was waiting near the glass chamber. This Velthari was taller than the others, and its shell was a darker color, almost black. It wore a silver band around its neck that seemed to show its rank. Its eyes, all 7 of them, turned to look at Do-yun as he entered. "So this is the human," the Velthari said. Its voice was different from the guards, slower and more deliberate. It spoke like someone who was used to being listened to. "I am Overseer Keth. I am in charge of processing on this ship." Do-yun said nothing, he just watched. Keth walked around him slowly, studying him from every angle. "Fascinating. Your species is very strange looking. Soft skin, small eyes, only 2 arms. And yet your ships gave us more trouble than expected. Several of my soldiers were killed before we captured you." "You attacked our diplomatic mission," Do-yun said. His voice was calm. "We defended ourselves." "Diplomatic mission," Keth repeated, making a sound that might have been laughter. "Yes, we intercepted your communications. You were trying to form an alliance with the Brel. You wanted to unite species against the Dominion." Do-yun did not deny it. There was no point in lying. Keth stopped in front of him. "It does not matter now. Your mission has failed. Your crew is dead, and you will tell us everything we need to know about your species." "I will tell you nothing." Keth's many eyes seemed to gleam. "They all say that. Every species says that at first. The Kasari said it. The Brel said it. The Umi said it, and they all broke. They all told us everything." Keth gestured to the glass chamber. "This is where it happens. We call it processing, but that is just a polite word. What really happens is much simpler. We show you your fear. We make you feel it completely, totally, without any escape. And then you break." Do-yun looked at the chamber. It looked empty and harmless, just glass and air. But he knew better. "Put him inside," Keth ordered. 2 guards grabbed Do-yun's arms and pushed him toward the chamber. A section of the glass slid open, and they shoved him through. The glass closed behind him, and he was alone in the small space. He tested the walls. They were solid and thick, impossible to break. There was no door handle on the inside, no way to escape. The air smelled clean and cold. Above him he could see an observation area. Keth and the scientists were moving up there, settling into seats behind more screens. They were going to watch like he was a performance, an experiment. Keth's voice came through a speaker in the ceiling. "Can you hear me, human?" "Yes." "Good. Let me explain what is about to happen. We are going to release a gas into your chamber. We call it Vethal. It is not poisonous and it will not hurt your body. It will only affect your mind." Do-yun waited. "The Vethal works differently for every species. It finds your deepest fear, the thing that terrifies you more than anything else, and it makes you experience that fear completely. You will not be able to escape it. You will not be able to reason with it. You will only feel. And then you will break," Keth said simply. "Your mind will surrender to save itself. You will tell us anything to make the fear stop. It is not your fault. It is biology. No species can resist what their own brain does to them." Do-yun looked up at the observation area. He could see the Velthari watching him, their many eyes bright with curiosity. They had done this hundreds of times, maybe thousands. They were confident. They knew what would happen. "We are ready to begin," Keth announced. "Starting Vethal release now." A soft hissing sound came from somewhere below. Doyun looked down and saw pale green gas rising from vents in the floor. It moved slowly, like smoke but thicker. It smelled strange, like copper and something electric. The gas rose to his knees, then his waist. Doyun's heart began to beat faster. His palms were sweating. These were normal responses, he told himself. His body was preparing for danger. Then the gas reached his face, and he breathed it in. The effect was immediate. Fear hit him like a wave, sudden and overwhelming. Every terrible memory he had ever experienced came back at once. The first time he saw death. The night he almost died in a training accident. The faces of friends he had lost in battle. They all rushed into his mind, screaming for attention. His deepest fear rose up from somewhere inside him. It was not one thing but many things. It was failure. It was losing the people he loved. It was dying alone in the darkness of space. It was being forgotten. The fear was so strong that it felt physical. His chest tightened. His breath came fast and shallow. His legs wanted to collapse. Up in the observation area, the Velthari watched their screens. Numbers and charts showed the human's vital signs. Heart rate increasing rapidly. Brain activity off the charts. Stress hormones flooding his system. His fear response is very strong, one scientist noted. Perhaps stronger than most species. Keth leaned forward, watching carefully. This was always the most interesting part. Soon the human would start to scream. Then he would cry. Then he would beg. They always did. But something strange happened. The human did not scream. He did not cry. Instead, he closed his eyes. He took a deep breath. And then he smiled. The scientists looked at each other in confusion. This was not supposed to happen. The data on their screens did not make sense. The fear response was still there, still incredibly strong. The human's body was full of terror, but he was smiling. Doyun opened his eyes. The fear was still there, still roaring inside him like a fire. But he had felt fear before. He had lived with fear his entire life. On Earth, humans had a saying, feel the fear and do it anyway. He had learned that lesson as a child when he climbed his first high cliff. He had learned it again as a teenager when he fought in his first competition. He had learned it every day as a soldier, facing situations that could kill him. Fear was not his enemy. Fear was a tool. When humans felt fear, something special happened in their bodies. A chemical called adrenaline flooded their muscles. Their senses became sharper. Their strength increased. Their minds focused. Fear made humans more dangerous, not less. Doyun dropped to the floor and started doing push-ups. Up in the observation area, the Velthari stared in complete shock. "What is he doing?" Keth demanded. No one could answer. In all their years of processing, in all the species they had conquered, they had never seen anything like this. The fear gas was working perfectly. The human was terrified, but instead of breaking, he was exercising. "Increase the concentration," Keth ordered. "Double it." More gas poured into the chamber. The air became thick with green mist. Doyun's fear increased. He could feel it, but so did his focus. His heart pounded, and he used that energy to push harder. 20 push-ups, 30, 40. His muscles burned, but that was good. The physical pain gave his mind something else to focus on. This was a technique he had learned in survival training. When you could not escape fear, you had to use it. "Triple the concentration," Keth said, his voice tighter now. "Maximum output." The gas became so thick that Doyun could barely see the walls. The fear inside him was enormous now, a monster trying to swallow him whole. Every part of his brain screamed at him to panic, to run, to surrender. Instead, he stood up and began to run in place. His legs pumped, his arms moved, sweat poured down his face. The fear fed his adrenaline, and the adrenaline fed his muscles. He was not fighting the fear, he was riding it. In the observation area, the screens showed readings that the Velthari had never seen before. The human's fear response was at maximum, beyond what any species had ever recorded. But at the same time, his physical performance was increasing. His heart rate was high but steady. His brain activity showed intense focus rather than panic. He was not breaking, he was getting stronger. Keth gripped the edge of his observation platform. This was impossible. This was against everything they knew about biology, about psychology, about fear itself. He looked down at the human, who was now shadow boxing in a cloud of green gas. And for the first time in his long career, Overseer Keth felt something he had never expected. He felt afraid. They released fear gas. The human took a deep breath and smiled. Part 3. The observation area had become chaos. Velthari scientists were arguing with each other, pointing at screens, checking and rechecking their equipment. Some thought the machines were broken. Others thought the gas had been made wrong. But the readings kept coming back the same. Everything was working perfectly. The human was just not breaking. Keth stood in the middle of the chaos, his many eyes fixed on the glass chamber below. The green gas was so thick now that the human was just a shadow moving inside it. But that shadow was still moving, still active, still not broken. Overseer, one scientist said nervously, we have never used this much Vethal on any subject. If we add more, we might damage his brain permanently. He would become useless for interrogation. Keth waved the scientist away. He needed to understand what was happening. In his entire career, he had never failed to break a subject. He had broken warriors and leaders, heroes and villains. Fear was the great equalizer. Everyone feared something. He pressed a button on his console. Human, can you hear me? In the chamber below, Doyan stopped moving. He was breathing hard, covered in sweat, but his mind was clear. The fear was still there, a constant pressure inside his skull, but he had learned to work with it. I can hear you, he said. Your response is unusual, Keth said. Our data shows that you are experiencing intense terror. Your brain chemistry confirms this, and yet you are not breaking. Explain. Doyan laughed. It was a rough sound, tired but genuine. You want me to explain? Yes, I want to understand. Doyan wiped the sweat from his face and looked up at the observation area. He could not see the Velthari through the thick gas, but he knew they were watching. All those eyes, staring at him like he was a puzzle to solve. All right, he said. I will explain, but I need you to listen carefully because this is something your species clearly does not understand. He took a deep breath of the fear gas and started talking. Let me tell you about my planet. It is called Earth. It is a small world, nothing special in terms of size or resources, but Earth is what we call a death world. Do you know what that means? Keth did not respond, but Doyan continued anyway. It means that almost everything on our planet was trying to kill us. When my species was young, we were weak. We had no claws, no fangs, no poison, no armor. We could not run very fast. We could not fly. We were just soft, slow creatures walking on two legs. He started walking in a circle around the chamber, moving as he talked. The movement helped him think. The fear was still pushing at him, but talking gave him focus. The animals on our world were terrifying. There were great cats that could tear us apart. There were wolves that hunted in packs. There were bears that could kill us with one swipe of their paws. And that was just the animals. Our planet also had earthquakes, volcanoes, floods, storms, and diseases. Everything wanted us dead. One of the scientists leaned toward Keth. Is he telling the truth? Unknown, Keth replied. Continue monitoring. Doyan kept talking. So how did we survive? How did a soft, slow, weak species become the dominant life form on a death world? He stopped walking and faced the observation area directly. We learned to use fear. The words hung in the air. The Velthari were silent. You see, fear is just a response. It is the brain telling the body that danger is coming. Most animals have two reactions to fear. They run away or they freeze. Those are the survival instincts. He started moving again, his body still full of nervous energy from the gas. But humans developed a third reaction. When we feel fear, something happens in our bodies. A chemical called adrenaline floods our system. Our hearts beat faster, our muscles get stronger, our minds get sharper. We become better versions of ourselves. He laughed again, amazed at the situation he was in. Here he was, surrounded by fear gas, giving a lecture to aliens about human biology. We call it the fight or flight response, but here is the important part. Humans learned that we could choose which one. We could take the fear and turn it into power. We could run toward the danger instead of away from it. Up in the observation area, the scientists were recording everything. This was new information about a new species. Even if they did not understand it, they needed to document it. That is how we survived the death world, Doyun continued. When a great cat attacked, we did not run and hide. We picked up spears and fought back. When a storm came, we did not freeze in place. We built shelters. When disease came, we did not accept death. We found cures. He stopped and looked at his hands, still shaking slightly from the adrenaline. Fear is part of us. It is woven into every piece of who we are, but we are not controlled by it. We control it. We use it. Fear is not our master. Fear is our tool. Keth's voice came through the speaker, colder than before. You are saying that your species has evolved to resist fear. No, Doyun said. I am saying we evolved to use it. There is a difference. He walked to the glass wall and put his hand against it. Let me tell you something else about humans. On our world, we have these things called horror movies. They are stories designed to scare us. People pay money to sit in dark rooms and feel afraid. We watch monsters and killers and ghosts, and we enjoy it. The concept was so alien that the Velthari had no framework to understand it. We also have something called extreme sports. People jump out of airplanes. They climb dangerous mountains. They swim with sharks. They do these things because the fear makes them feel alive. Doyun smiled, a real smile this time. You designed your entire empire around the idea that fear is the ultimate weapon, that if you scare someone enough, they will break. And that works on species that see fear as something bad, something to avoid. He knocked on the glass with his knuckles. But humans are different. We have been dancing with fear since we were running from lions on the African savanna. We have spent our entire existence learning how to take our terror and turn it into strength. He took another deep breath of the gas, filling his lungs with it deliberately. You want to scare a human. You will have to try harder than making us feel alive. The observation area was silent. Even the machines seemed quieter, as if the ship itself was listening. Finally, Keth spoke. You are saying that the Vethal is useless against your species. Not useless, Doyun said. I can feel the fear. It is very real. Your gas is doing exactly what it is supposed to do, but fear does not break us. Fear is what we use to break our limits. He dropped to the floor and started doing push-ups again, faster this time. The fear was giving him energy, and he needed to use that energy or it would consume him. My people have a saying, he called out between breaths. What does not kill us makes us stronger. You have been making me stronger for the last hour. Keth turned to his scientists. Is this possible? Can a species truly evolve in this way? The lead scientist looked at the data on the screens. Overseer, everything he is saying matches his biological responses. When we increase the fear, his body releases more chemicals that enhance his physical abilities. His species has somehow turned a survival mechanism into a performance enhancer. Then how do we break him? The scientist hesitated. I do not know. Our methods rely on fear being a weakness. If fear is their strength, then our entire approach is flawed. Keth felt something cold spreading through his body. It was an unfamiliar sensation, and it took him a moment to recognize it. He had spent so long studying fear in others that he had almost forgotten what it felt like himself. But now he remembered. Down in the chamber, Do-yun was still exercising, still using the terror as fuel. He was not breaking, he was adapting. And somewhere in the back of Keth's mind, a thought formed. If one human could resist the Vethal, what would happen when the Dominion faced an entire fleet of them? An entire planet. For the first time in his long life, Overseer Keth looked at a prisoner and saw not a victim, but a threat. Not to him personally, but to everything the Velthari had built. And that thought scared him more than anything the Vethal could produce. They released fear gas. The human took a deep breath and smiled. Part 4. News traveled fast on a prison ship. The Velthari guards tried to keep what happened in the processing chamber a secret, but there were too many witnesses. Scientists talked to other scientists. Guards whispered to each other during shift changes. And somehow, the story found its way down to the prison blocks. Ravi heard it from a Brel prisoner in the next cell, who heard it from a Kasari worker who cleaned the observation area. The human did not break, the Brel said, his blue skin pale with amazement. They used maximum Vethal, more than they have ever used on anyone, and he just kept exercising. Ravi's ears stood straight up. That is impossible, everyone breaks. Not this one, the guards are scared. I have never seen them scared before. Back in his cell, Ravi sat in the corner and thought about the human he had met, Han Do-yun. He had seemed so ordinary, so calm. He had asked questions about the Velthari like he was preparing for a test, not preparing to die. Maybe that was the secret. Maybe that strange calm was something humans carried inside them. The prisoners began to whisper. For the first time in years, they had something new to talk about. The Velthari had always seemed invincible, their fear weapon unstoppable. But now there was proof that resistance was possible. Hope was a dangerous thing on a prison ship. The Velthari had worked hard to eliminate it. But hope was spreading now, cell by cell, species by species. Meanwhile, Do-yun was returned to his cell after 8 hours in the processing chamber. The Velthari had finally stopped the gas when it became clear that it was not working. They needed time to study their data, to figure out what went wrong. Do-yun collapsed on the floor of the cell, completely exhausted. His body had burned through all his energy, and now he could barely move. But he was alive, and his mind was still his own. Ravi rushed to his side. You did it, you really did it. I survived, Do-yun said, his voice rough. For now. No, you do not understand. Everyone is talking about you. The other prisoners, they know what happened. They are saying that the Velthari cannot break humans. They are saying that maybe the Velthari are not as powerful as they thought. Do-yun closed his eyes. He was too tired to feel proud. All he felt was the deep ache in his muscles and the lingering echo of fear in his mind. That is good. Hope is important. The guards are angry, Ravi warned. I heard them talking. Overseer Keth is not happy. He will try again. Let him try. Far from the pale silence, another human was not giving up. Lieutenant Park Yuna had survived the ambush by pure luck. When the Velthari ships attacked the Harang, she had been in the cargo bay checking supplies. The explosion had thrown her into an escape pod, and automatic systems had launched it before she even understood what was happening. For 3 days she had floated in space, watching her air supply decrease and trying not to panic. Then she had picked up the signal of the Velthari ship. They were not looking for escape pods. They thought everyone was dead. But Yuna was not dead, and she was not the type to leave her sergeant behind. Her escape pod had minimal weapons and almost no fuel, but it had a cloaking system designed for emergencies. She attached herself to the outer hull of the pale silence like a tick on a dog, hidden in a blind spot between sensor arrays. For the past 2 days, she had been studying the ship, learning its patterns, looking for a way in. She had found a maintenance hatch that was rarely used. She had memorized the guard rotation times. She had collected every piece of information she could. Now she was ready. Yuna was smaller than Do-yeon, but she was faster and quieter. She had trained in infiltration and close combat. She knew how to move without being seen. She also carried something the Velthari had not expected: rage. They had killed her friends. They had destroyed her ship. They had taken her sergeant, and she was going to make them pay. The maintenance hatch opened with a soft hiss, and Yuna slipped inside the pale silence. Back in the observation area, Keth was reviewing the data from Do-yeon's processing session. The numbers still did not make sense to him. Fear response at maximum, physical performance increasing, mental stability maintained. It was as if humans had been designed specifically to resist the Vethal. "We need to change our approach," he told his senior scientist. "The gas alone is not enough. We need to find something that will truly break him." The scientist hesitated. "Overseer, there is another possibility we have not discussed." "Speak. What if we cannot break him at all? What if his species is simply immune to our methods?" Keth's eyes narrowed. "Then we kill him and study the body. If we cannot use him for information, we can at least learn their biology." "That seems wasteful." "It is practical. We cannot allow the other prisoners to see him as a symbol of resistance. Already there are whispers. The Umi and the Brel are becoming restless. If we do not do something soon, we could have problems." Keth made his decision. "Tomorrow morning, we will bring him to the central atrium in front of all the prisoners. We will show them what happens to those who resist. If he will not break, we will make an example of him." The scientist nodded and left to make preparations. Keth looked at the image of Do-yeon on his screen. The human was sleeping now, curled up on the floor of his cell. He looked so small, so harmless. How could such a creature be so much trouble? But Keth had learned something today. He had learned that the universe was larger than he thought, and that not everything worked the way the Dominion expected. There were species out there that did not follow the rules. And that was a dangerous thing for an empire built on those rules. In the prison blocks, the whispers continued. Prisoners who had not spoken in cycles were talking again. Species who had given up hope were starting to believe. A Kasari worker named Tem made secret marks on the walls, counting down to something he called the moment. A Brel scientist named Doc began hiding tools in his clothing. An Umi elder named Suki started teaching the younger prisoners about the old days, before the Velthari came. Something was changing on the pale silence. The fear that had kept everyone in line was still there, but now there was something else too. Something that scared the Velthari more than any weapon. Hope. Ravi sat next to Do-yeon as the human slept. He watched the strange creature breathe, marveling at how peaceful he looked. This being had faced the worst thing the Velthari could do and had survived. Not just survived, but smiled. Maybe, Ravi thought, the universe was not as hopeless as he had believed. Maybe there was still a chance. He looked toward the glass wall of the cell, toward the dark hallway beyond. Somewhere on this ship, the Velthari were planning their next move. And somewhere else, he hoped, someone was planning to rescue them. He did not know about Yuna, of course. He did not know that at that very moment, a human woman was crawling through the maintenance tunnels of the ship, getting closer with every second. But he knew something had changed. He could feel it in the air, in the way the other prisoners whispered, in the way the guards seemed nervous. The Velthari had made a mistake bringing the human here. They had wanted to study fear. Instead, they had learned to feel it. They released fear gas. The human took a deep breath and smiled. Part 5. The central atrium of the pale silence was the largest open space on the ship. It had been designed for ceremonies and important announcements, a place where the Velthari could display their power to their prisoners. High walls rose up on all sides, lined with cells that overlooked the main floor. Today, every cell was occupied, every prisoner forced to watch. Do-yun was brought out in heavy restraints. His hands were bound behind his back and metal clamps held his ankles together. 6 guards surrounded him, their weapons ready. Overseer Keth was taking no chances. The prisoners watched from above. Ravi pressed his face against the glass of his cell, his heart beating fast. He could see Do-yun below, walking slowly because of the ankle restraints. Even from this distance, Ravi could see that the human was not afraid. He was whistling. Keth stood on a raised platform at the center of the atrium, surrounded by screens and equipment. His voice echoed through speakers placed throughout the space. Prisoners of the Pale Silence, today you will witness what happens to those who resist the Dominion. He gestured to Do-yun, who was being pushed toward the platform by the guards. This creature is called a human. Yesterday, he was processed in our interrogation chamber. He was exposed to maximum levels of Vethal, enough to break any species we have ever encountered. And yet he did not break. Murmurs rippled through the prisoners. They had heard the rumors, but hearing it confirmed by the overseer himself was different. Some of you may see this as hope, Keth continued. Some of you may think that if one creature can resist, then perhaps you can too. You are wrong. He turned to face Do-yun directly. This human has proven that he cannot be broken by normal means. Therefore, we will not try to break him. We will simply eliminate him. Let this be a lesson to all of you. Resistance is not brave. Resistance is useless. A guard stepped forward with a weapon. It was long and sleek, designed to kill quickly and cleanly. The Velthari believed in efficiency, even in executions. Do-yun looked up at the cells above him. Hundreds of eyes from dozens of species were watching. These prisoners had been broken by fear, controlled by it, enslaved to it. But he could see something in some of those eyes. A flicker, a spark. He smiled at them, a real smile, warm and confident. And then the lights went out. The entire atrium was plunged into darkness. Emergency alarms began blaring, red lights flashing in the blackness. Guards shouted in confusion. Prisoners screamed. In the chaos, Yuna made her move. She had spent hours planting devices throughout the ship, small machines that would overload the power grid at exactly the right moment. Now, she dropped from a maintenance vent directly behind the guards holding Do-yun. Before they could react, she was among them. Her knife moved in the darkness, quick and precise. 3 guards fell before the others even understood what was happening. "Sergeant," she shouted, grabbing his arm. "Lieutenant," Do-yun said with relief. "Good timing." Yuna cut through his restraints with her knife. "We need to move. The power will only be down for a few minutes." But Do-yun did not run toward the exit. Instead, he ran toward the main control platform. "What are you doing?" Yuna demanded. "Finishing this." He reached the platform and began working the controls. He did not understand Velthari language, but the system was simple enough. Override symbols, distribution networks, ventilation systems. "They built their whole empire on fear," he said as he worked. "Time to show them what that really means." He found what he was looking for. The Vethal distribution system. The same gas that had been used on him was stored in tanks throughout the ship, ready to be pumped into any area at a moment's notice. Do-yun activated all of them at once. Green gas began pouring out of every vent on the ship, not just in the processing chamber, not just in the prison blocks, but everywhere. The command deck, the guard quarters, the science labs, every corner of the Pale Silence was filling with the very weapon the Velthari had created. And the Velthari had no resistance to it at all. Keth felt the gas first. It touched his shell, seeped through his breathing membranes, and entered his system. For a moment, he did not understand what was happening. Then the fear hit him. It was overwhelming, absolute, the most terrible thing he had ever experienced. His species had spent generations creating this weapon, but they had never thought to develop immunity to it. Why would they? They never expected to face it themselves. Keth collapsed to the floor, his many legs twitching, his many eyes wild with terror. All around him, other Velthari were doing the same. Guards dropped their weapons and curled into balls. Scientists screamed and ran into walls. The proud, cold, logical masters of the pale silence were reduced to helpless, crying creatures. But the prisoners were different. They had been exposed to fear for so long that they had developed their own kind of resistance. Not like humans, who used fear as fuel, but a numbness, a distance. The Vethal affected them, but not as strongly as it affected the Velthari. And they had something else now. They had hope. Ravi was the first to move. The lock on his cell had released when the power failed, and now he pushed the door open. The gas was making him afraid, but he thought about the human in the atrium, and he forced himself to walk. Other prisoners followed. The Kasari, the Brel, the Umi, species that had been broken and enslaved were now moving through the ship, stepping over the fallen Velthari, taking their weapons, taking their power. In the central atrium, Doyun and Yuna watched as the uprising spread. "You are insane," Yuna said, but she was smiling. "You released fear gas on a whole ship." "Fear is only scary if you let it control you," Doyun replied. "They never learned that, we did." He looked around at the chaos. Velthari guards were crying and shaking on the floor. Prisoners were taking over control stations, opening more cells, freeing more of their people. The pale silence was falling. Ravi appeared out of the green mist, his fur damp with sweat but his eyes bright. "Human, you did it. You really did it." Doyun put a hand on the small alien's shoulder. "We did it, all of us together." More prisoners were gathering now. Brel and Kasari and Umi and a dozen other species that Doyun could not name. They were looking at him with something he had not expected to see, not just gratitude, respect. "What do we do now?" one of them asked. Doyun looked at Yuna, she shrugged. "Your rescue, your call." He thought for a moment. They had a ship now. They had weapons. They had freed prisoners from a dozen worlds, and the Velthari Dominion had no idea what was coming. "First, we take full control of this ship," he said. "Then we learn everything we can from their computers. Then we go home and warn our people about what is out there." He paused, looking around at the gathered prisoners. "And then we come back, not as prisoners, not as victims, but as something the Dominion has never faced before, a united force of free peoples who are not afraid anymore." A cheer rose from the prisoners. It was rough and ragged, but it was real. Hours later, when the gas had cleared and the situation was under control, Doyun stood on the command deck of the ship he was now calling the New Dawn. Through the viewport, he could see the stars stretching out to infinity. Somewhere out there was Earth. Somewhere else was the heart of the Velthari Dominion. Yuna had accessed the communication systems. "We can send a message to Velthari High Command. What do you want to say?" Doyun thought about everything that had happened. The ambush, the cell, the processing chamber, the fear gas and the way it had made him feel more alive than he had in years. He stepped up to the communication console and began to speak. "This is Sergeant Han Doyun of the human vessel New Dawn, formerly the Velthari prison ship Pale Silence. I have a message for the Dominion." He took a deep breath. "You built your empire on fear. For generations, you have conquered world after world by exploiting the terror of other species. You believed that fear was the ultimate power, that no one could stand against it." He smiled. It was the same smile he had worn in the processing chamber, the smile of a creature who had found something the Velthari never expected. "You were wrong. My species has lived with fear since the beginning of our existence. We have run from predators, survived disasters, and faced death more times than we can count. Fear is not our enemy. Fear is our oldest friend. It makes us stronger, faster, sharper. It makes us human. He looked out at the stars. You wanted to study us. You wanted to understand how to break us. Instead, you taught us something about ourselves. You reminded us that the thing you thought was our weakness is actually our greatest strength. We are coming. Not just humans, but all the species you have broken and enslaved. We are coming, and we are not afraid. He paused, then added one final thought. Well, actually, we are afraid. We are always afraid. But here is the thing about humans. We have learned to smile anyway. He ended the transmission and turned to face his crew, a mix of humans and freed prisoners from across the galaxy. Ravi stood near the back, his ears perked up, his eyes shining. The Brel and Kassari were there too, along with others. They were all looking at him, waiting. All right, Doyan said. Let us go make the Velthari regret ever hearing the word human. The new dawn turned toward the stars and accelerated into the unknown. And in the command centers of the Velthari Dominion, receivers hummed with the message from the pale silence. Officers listened, confused at first, then alarmed. They had never heard a conquered species speak this way. They had never faced an enemy that welcomed fear. They had never faced humans. But they would soon. And somewhere deep in the collective consciousness of the galaxy, a new idea was being born. A story was beginning to spread, whispered from world to world, species to species. There was a species out there that could not be broken, a species that smiled at fear, a species that was coming to change everything. The humans were here. And they were just getting started.